Now, the Trump administration has a new plan to screw over poor people who are barely making ends meet. And this plan involves changing what being poor actually means. Now, the Trump administration on Monday has moved to change the definition of poverty in the United States. Now, the proposal, Common Dreams explains, which combines the president's attempts to portray the U.S. economy as strong with its repeated attacks on working poor and their access to government services, would allow for millions of people to be cut off from aid they currently rely on. In a regulatory filing, President Trump's Office of Management and Budget wrote that it may change how inflation is calculated in order to reduce the number of Americans who are living below the federally recognized poverty line and are therefore eligible for certain government support services and social programs. Okay, so understand that instead of attacking some of the root causes of poverty, for example, low wages, right? The higher costs of goods and services, right? Student loan debt, lack of opportunity for people, for example, in inner cities and rural areas, right? All over the country. And we're not going to do any of that. No, we're just going to mess with the numbers to make it appear that less people are poor. So then we can kick them off food stamps and Medicaid, etc. Oh, well, that's a great plan, right? Now, that, of course, fulfills two different goals for conservatives. One, of course, it makes the administration and the economy look really good. And two, we're going to kick poor people off social services so that we can go and we can redistribute that money to the rich. Now, Melissa Botich, who oversees income security programs at the National Women's Law Center, wrote about this on Twitter. I want to share her tweets here. She said that the change seems technical, like a little wonkish, like, oh, you're just going to, you're going to look at the interest or the inflation and you're going to make some adjustments on this. However, she says it's not just that. It may look technical, but it's deceptive. It's actually a big attack on working people. In short, she says, Trump wants to weaken how our poverty definition keeps pace with the cost of living. So each year, as costs go up, many working people with low pay would gradually be stripped of WIC, Medicaid, and other basic services. And they do that by a tricky little move called Change CPI. Now, if you guys remember watching the show back during the Obama administration, that was the exact change that the President Obama and Joe Biden had put on the table. We're going to change Social Security to a changed CPI system, which essentially means a cut in your benefits. You get less money as the years go by. Now, here's how it works. According to Bloomberg News, change CPI would assume that consumers will change what they buy as items grow more expensive through inflation. So that's basically the baseline, right? It basically assumes that consumers will make different choices. For example, cheaper choices. Instead of buying designer clothes or designer shoes or whatever, oh no, they'll just go and change that and go to Walmart to buy their shirts. But wait a minute. I don't know any poor people who are buying designer clothes. They're already shopping at Walmart. They're already holding off getting new clothes because of how poor they actually are. I mean, this whole thing would suggest that people aren't really struggling to afford necessities. Oh, no. They're doing actually pretty well, even though they're considered poor. We just need to make them have them make better decisions. I mean, if they didn't make such poor choices to begin with, then they wouldn't be poor. Now, what's funny is that this kind of coincides with a recent article from USA Today. Now, they calculated, and I love when they do this, right? Because every time it is incredibly tone deaf. It had an article that suggested that Americans could save $18,000 a year if they cut certain things out of their budget. Oh, really? Well, okay, do you want to know what it included? You're going to love this. Things like ride sharing, fast food, grooming supplies. Yes, grooming. As in personal freaking hygiene. Who needs that? Who needs to get a haircut? Or am I right? Am I right? You save a lot of money by never getting a haircut. They also have buying lunch. Just skip lunch and you'll stop being poor. I mean, you don't need to eat anyway. No, just have breakfast and dinner, real cheap, and skip lunch. It's fine. It's fine. You'll save tons of money. Not only that, but there's, of course, things like cable. I know a lot of people my age that have cut the cord that no longer have cable TV. Online shopping and impulse shopping, among other things, right? Now, look, I don't know a lot of people, poor people who impulse shop. And look, I know, it's maybe it's not a great example, but look, I was poor for most of my life. Did I impulse shop? Not really. So some of the stuff that you see here, you kind of need, like lunch and personal grooming, very important for people, right? Because if you don't get a haircut every once in a while, unless you're, of course, follically challenged like myself, you might want to get a haircut, or else people are going to start calling you a bin raccoon. Points to people who get that reference. Now, again, functionally, right, back to how this works. Now, the definitional change, they explain, would result in a slower inflation rate, which is used to determine how many Americans are eligible for programs like Medicaid, SNAP benefits, and other federal assistance. And as of 2018, and this number is astounding, a family of four making $25,900 per year was considered to be living in poverty, based on the necessities they could afford with the current inflation rate. Under the new system, OMB officials wrote in the proposal, changes to the poverty thresholds, including how they are updated for inflation over time, may affect eligibility for programs that use those poverty guidelines. Now those, again, $25,900 for a family of four, that could be, I mean, they could change that to where you have to be even poorer, where $25,900 a year is not poor enough to get food stamps. That's insanity. Insanity. So you are barely surviving. You are not making a lot of money when you're making that. And you're buying the basics. And here comes the Trump administration with change CPI saying, we're going to cut you off at the knees. We think you're making too much. We think you're living too well. So, yeah, we're just going to mess with the numbers. And if you suddenly become ineligible for your food stamps, well, it's a sad day for you. I mean, it is such a rich person assumption that you can, that the whole problem that you're poor is that you're not budgeting well enough. No, if you're poor, it means you never really had the money for that stuff to begin with. And by the way, I'm not saying that some people don't waste money on things that people say that they shouldn't, right? Or on stuff you're not recommended by. So maybe once in a while a poor person has an impulse buy and buys something that they want, like a movie or a game or whatever, right? Or goes to a movie or eats out once in a while. I mean, look, that person, I mean, think about that, right? Being in that position and actually getting the, having the extra money or taking the extra money to actually treat yourself once in a while to going out to eat. I mean, when you're used to eating ramen or macaroni and cheese and peanut butter sandwiches, maybe if you're so lucky, you have a peanut butter sandwich or whatever, and you get to go out every once in a while. Or you save some of that money like, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to treat myself for once. Imagine being in that mindset. Imagine being in that, right? And actually being, and I've been there before. It's just so nice to go and do something for yourself to forget how miserable the rest of your life is. And that's kind of what happens. I think that's kind of what these people go through. It's like, whatever, I'm already super broke, I can hardly afford anything. Whatever, I'm just going to do something that makes me happy for just a couple of minutes. Or maybe an hour or whatever. And they don't understand, people don't understand that, right? I mean, it's just getting them anything to make them happy in what is otherwise a very miserable situation. Now, back to Botich here, right? Now, she also wrote the proposal, and this is in a series of tweets, demonstrates how out of touch Trump is with the lives of working class people. And I would suggest that it's way more than just Trump that is out of touch with the American people, with people working and still not being able to get ahead. She noted that even the current poverty line does little to reflect the amount of money an American family actually needs to live comfortably in America. In fact, the new standards, she writes, will make the government's understanding of poverty and inequality even less accurate. She said that Americans on average report that it would take more than $55,000 in annual income to be considered out of poverty. Now, the current poverty line is as I mentioned before, it was somewhere around $25,000. It would take double than what is currently considered the poverty line to actually not be poor. More than twice our current threshold. She also adds that this is a cynical attempt to squeeze working class people. Their incomes will still be too low to make ends meet, but Trump's decree would make it harder for them to qualify for help. And she is, of course, not the only critic here. David Roberts chimed in here, and he said Trump is going to change how poverty is measured with the intent of rendering a bunch of people ineligible for social assistance. His base will support this arbitrary cruelty because even though it hurts them, it also hurts brown people. So there is that racial component in there, which seems to always be a part of Republican legislation. It always tends to harm not only some of the poorest white Americans, but of course, a majority of, or I won't say a majority, but a lot of black and brown people. Democratic Coalition also tweeted, "This appears to be the latest cruel and incompetent effort by the Trump administration to make it harder to access welfare programs." And Paul Krugman is an economist. I don't always agree with him, but he had a good tweet here. He said, "For the moment, Republicans have mostly stopped pretending to care about the deficits, but they're still eager to cut aid to the poor." Well, that's because the Republican Party despises poor people. They hate their own voters. They really do. Because they are the party, not just of the rich. And you can argue very successfully that both parties have been captured by wealthy interests. Absolutely. However, what makes the Republicans different than Democrats, and it is a big difference, is cruelty. Democrats are the party of the rich, but they'll throw you a bone. Republicans revel in their cruelty towards the poor. And that is unfortunately the big difference. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.